This podcast is sponsored by Orchid Live. Orchid Live is a specialist occupational health software used by a number of SOM members to run every aspect of their occupational health operations. They hold healthcare records for over 1 million UK workers and work with both in-house OH teams and OH providers. You can find out more at orchidlive.com. Hello and welcome to the SOM Podcast. I'm Steve Randall, and this episode is one of a monthly series to help you as an occupational health professional with your CPD, as we invite specialists to share an overview of some of the topics you've told us you'd like to find out more about.
I'm Fiona Day. I had a 20-plus year career in medicine as public health consultant and a medical director for CCG and NHS board. And I did the diploma in occupational medicine in 2015. I was always interested in occupational health from some of my earlier public health career, and since 2017, I've been working independently as an executive coach, and I'm now a chartered psychologist in coaching psychology, working with medical and public health leaders across the UK and internationally. I'm absolutely committed to the professionalisation of coaching and understanding the evidence base about what works for leadership development in healthcare, and I have 4 peer-reviewed publications around this topic in BMJ Leader and another one, hopefully about to come out soon in the RSP 8 Journal Public Health. There's a recent systematic umbrella review, which I wasn't a part of, which is really important for listeners to be aware of, by Philipson et al. That was published in BMJ Leader earlier in 2025, which was a systematic review of systematic reviews for healthcare, of which about half of the participants in the studies were doctors. And it's really a really important study because it's, the first time anything like this has been done on that kind of scale. That really does summarise the state of the evidence. It's not specialty specific, but it is about the kind of core elements of effective leadership development. And we know from that experiential learning, so active learning on the job rather than didactic courses or e-learning, is the main way that we help to grow medical and occupational health leaders and leaders in healthcare, and that coaching and mentoring, although they didn't separate between the two, up there with the most effective method. So we do know what to do and how to go about doing it in terms of effective leadership development in healthcare. So that's really the first time that we've had such a great synthesis of the research.
Excellent. And how does coaching psychology compare with traditional leadership training in producing sustained behaviour change in healthcare leaders?
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic question. So coaching psychology is a relatively new branch of the discipline of psychology, and is a chartered psychologist in coaching psychology, like myself, is a doctoral level award. So it's like a kind of CCT equivalent in psychology. So it's like the highest level of award that a psychologist can have. And a recent meta-analysis was undertaken that found that coaching psychologists, or psychologically informed coaching, has even better outcomes in all domains, but particularly around affective domains in terms of the emotional side. Because, the top leaders that I work with, it's always the psychological edge of leadership that is the challenge for people, because we're hardwired to want to please or to avoid conflict. Coaching psychology helps leaders to actually grow the shape of their brains and helps them to grow bigger than the challenges. And so that way they can deal with increasingly complex environments. So mentoring, say, for example, is more kind of teaching people how to do it, whereas coaching is helping people to figure it out for themselves and growing their brains that way. And coaching psychology is using evidence-based psychological techniques and tools to effect change in leaders, both in terms of their behaviours, but also in terms of helping to grow the shape of their brains in specific ways to enable them to feel confident, to stay well, and to be effective in their roles.
Now, we know from the many guests that we've had on this podcast over the years that having a great mentor is often cited as being a pivotal moment in somebody's career. And those same people may now be becoming mentors themselves, or thinking that, I'm in that position now where I have the experience and, maybe they're in a leadership role already, or they're just somebody who feels that they want to give back, they want to share their experience. How would learning coaching deepen that, and how would that make them a better mentor? Should everybody who's thinking of being a mentor look at coaching as being something which would be an important part of that?
Yeah, fantastic question. So I'm accredited by the European Mentoring and Coaching Council to teach coaching and mentoring for health leaders. And how I approach that is most people, by the time they get reasonably senior in their career, they're already really, really skilled mentors. They know how to pass on their knowledge and help other people to benefit from that. But the thing that they struggle with is actually the coaching approach. So how I approach this is that all mentors should learn how to coach, and to coach first. So by that, I mean they're helping their person that they're working with, their mentee, their coachee, their supervisee, their colleague, helping them first of all to try and figure things out for themselves. And only if that individual isn't able to figure it out for themselves do they then revert to a mentoring approach. So it's quite a subtle shift, but it's actually really quite challenging for people, particularly as they're learning this, to recognize that we so easily just go into the mentoring approach because we're professional advice givers. That's, we've had decades of training to give advice in all sorts of different areas of our professional lives, and we're very good at it, and that's really great. And there's a time when actually it's more important that we help the other person to learn how to learn and to figure things out for themselves. So when I'm teaching coaching and mentoring skills, I always say it's unethical to leave somebody to not know how to do things if you can see a way to do that, but you only kind of dive in with your advice after you've given the other person the opportunity to try and figure it out for themselves. And actually giving people the gift of a bit of time to think things through and to figure things out for themselves. It's a real gift to be able to do that. And it's not to say that people always have the answers within themselves. So like I say, sometimes people do need advice from the benefit of your experience, or they do need evidence-based strategies. Like in coaching psychology, we draw on these evidence-based psychological strategies. So often with a bit of time and support, they can figure quite a lot out for themselves. But coaching impacts at what's called the metacognitive level rather than it impacts at cognitive, affective and skills level too, but it does definitely impact at, we know from research, at the metacognitive level in terms of people's ability to take a step back and look at the whole, and then be able to work out what to do and how to organize things and how to conduct themselves, and what we call the subject-object shift. So instead of feeling like everything's very kind of personal, they're able to take a step back and look at, for example, why somebody might be behaving in a particular way. So I like to think, we try to understand why somebody's behaving in a certain way. There's a function behind every behavior, and trying to understand that both in ourselves and in other people, because leadership at the end of the day, it's a relational business. It's about, it's very, very interpersonal, and it's high levels of, I know we call it soft skills, don't we? But actually they're incredibly challenging. The level of sophistication and nuance that senior leaders need to be able to work effectively in the face of limited resources and competing agendas and partnership working. So being able to, really grow your metacognitive skills is really important. One of my publications in BMJ Leader, in fact, my first one, was a series of 80 senior medical and public health clients in 2018 to 2022. And I always measure their validated Warwick Edinburgh Wellbeing Scale, the short form version of that, before and after, with all of my clients. And so I published the before and after results. So these clients had an average of 8.4 hours of coaching and had a net positive 17.4% improvement in their wellbeing scales, which was off the scale statistically significant. And it was particularly marked in two domains within the Warwick Edinburgh Wellbeing Scale. One was, I feel optimistic about the future, and the other was, I feel able to make my mind up about things. And I think it's really important that coaches measure outcomes, like surgeons and doctors, for example. We measure outcomes. And so these are how we start to professionalize coaching and make sure we're measuring outcomes. And so coaching is not just about leadership development. It's not just about specific things like career coaching, but there is, these clients that I was working with, they were senior medical and public health leaders who were working on specific goals relating to leadership development and careers, and they had these coincidental almost findings on well-being. They weren't specifically health coaching or well-being coaching that we were working on with them. So I think that's really important, and that is congruent with NICE and the NICE guidelines for mental health in the workplace, that the kind of reviews that underpinned the 2022, I think it was, guidelines recommended preventative coaching for stress management. So, we are very clear from the literature around coaching about the positive impact on well-being, and I'm really pleased that I was able to show that in my own clients too.
Is there any evidence that if somebody is asking questions, so it's coming from their side rather than just listening passively, perhaps to somebody speaking about something, if they're actually asking the questions and framing it in the way that they're asking those questions, that they will then take on board the answers in a deeper, better way?
You put me on the spot there about that specific one, so I'm not quite sure exactly, but we do know that coaching helps people to ask better questions. And so, we want leaders who can ask better questions, because, that is the job of leading in complexity. There are, we call it vu déjà rather than déjà vu. It's never a thing we're in context that people have never seen it before. There is no kind of nice guidelines or protocols to follow. There's very few right ways to do leadership and very few wrong ways as well. And so it's a really difficult context for people to work in. But being able to, as a leader, to ask the right questions is one of the key skills. So we learn through, being in coaching relationships, we get to learn about good questions too.
So people listening to this now who hopefully they are listening because they want to develop better skills. That's the whole point of these mini CPD episodes that we do. How should they start out on this journey of using coaching psychology to be a better mentor?
So I think, first of all, starting to familiarise yourself with some of the evidence base. So I've got, as I say, these 4 publications in BMJ Leader which synthesize the evidence. So that would be a start, like just to make sure that you're up to date with the evidence, because I think people might be surprised to know that there are 9 international systematic reviews and meta-analyses about the evidence of coaching. So, that would be the first place, like just start to get familiar with the literature. And then you might want to think about, doing some training that is aligned with one of the coaching and or mentoring professional bodies, such as the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. So they have a set of competencies that you develop over a period of time at different levels, starting at foundation level, where there are 30 different competencies to be achieved, through to master practitioner, which I'm just about to renew my 5-year master practitioner. It's like a revalidation. That's coming up in a couple of months for me. So there's a kind of progression of competency around that you can develop. So there's a kind of a scaffolding, a framework to use around that. And then there are accredited courses with professional bodies that help you to learn those competencies. And it's not just about doing a course that's aligned with the competencies, though. It's like revalidation. In coaching and mentoring, we have what's called individual accreditation. So rather than, I've done my course, tick, that's me done. It's, being individually accredited is like a revalidation. It's a kind of 5-year license to practice. So coaching and mentoring, as you may know, are unregulated. Anybody can just set themselves up as a coach or mentor. So you don't need to actually have any training. But, the hallmark of a professional coach or mentor is that they are not only a member of a professional body, but they have been individually accredited by a professional body in terms of the whole of practice review. So not just that they've completed a course, but they're engaging in supervision, in ethical practice, in CPD, the whole in reflective practice, very, like I say, very similar to revalidation in the health services.
And specifically you, how can people find out more about what you do and connect with you?
Well, thank you for asking that. So 2 ways. One, I have a website, fionadayconsulting.co.uk. And I also have a podcast called Transformational Thinking for Health Leaders, which is available on all the main podcast providers.
Excellent. Well, it's been brilliant speaking to you, and thank you so much for your time and your insights, Fiona.
A pleasure. Love sharing the evidence base around coaching. So thank you for inviting me.
This podcast is sponsored by Orchid Live. Orchid Live is a specialist occupational health software used by a number of SOM members to run every aspect of their occupational health operations. They hold healthcare records for over 1 million UK workers and work with both in-house OH teams and OH providers. You can find out more at orchidlive.com.